Hey, everybody, welcome. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp, the most censored comedian in America. Thanks for being here. Let's get into how this has become the summer of fail. I'm going to focus mainly on foreign policy, although I see many of you in the comment threads are already putting in your points of how this has been the summer of fail of policy by the Biden administration, by our government in general. And, some of that is domestic. Plenty of it is foreign policy as well. But I'm going to focus on the foreign policy fails, which have been truly impressive and epic. I'm also, after that, going to get into the amazing right-wing coverage of defund the police. I mean, they are just continuing to do just a bang-up job on how much defunding of the police there has been here in the United States. I'm also going to get into other stories, such as some good news stories. What? How can that happen in this dystopian world of spiraling around the toilet drain? Good news of people getting out of prison, getting released after many years of being innocent people in prison, locked up in our prisons. I'm going to get into that story and others. That's all coming up. So thank you for joining me. Please click the thumbs up and the share. And if you're at rumble.com/Lee Clamp, no, I'm working on my name, any day now. I've been taking lessons every day. Any day I'm gonna fucking knock it out the park with this name saying thing. It's what all the kids are doing these days. They're all saying their name accurately, like they're better than me because they can say their name. If you're at rumble.com/Lee Camp, Lee Clamp was actually my dominatrix name. Lee Camp, then please click follow over there. It's free to watch and free to click follow over there as well. But let's get into it. So the main source I'm using for our summer affair here of foreign policy is Seymour Hersh, the beloved journalist who has done such amazing coverage recently, including revealing the U.S. Destruction, obliteration, bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline. But anyway, he talks about how this has been the summer of the hawks. But as he goes through it, it really just reveals how this is the summer of failed, pathetic foreign policy, just on every level. The U.S. is just atrocious. But let's start off with, and of course, and actually we're focusing not on Biden, but on people in Biden's administration, because let's be honest, I know it's going to come as a shocker to so many of you, but Biden not be making these decisions, okay? Joe Biden, they're lucky if he's got the spoon like pointed the right way, meaning like it's not upside down when he's scooping his pudding. Like because you do it upside down, the pudding just falls off the spoon. And so they've had a real time trying to educate him on how to get that spoon faced, the correct way so that the pudding can be masticated, although his teeth fall out. And anyway, that's a whole thing. That's why they focus on pudding and don't step it up from there. But so it's not really Joe Biden. It's people in his administration making a lot of these decisions. And we're going to start with Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. So he was in charge of this wonderful and just magnificent, just a real fulcrum in history, just a turning point of history. We're going to look back at this and we're going to go, it all changed at that peace summit that nobody can talk about because no one really talked about it. That just happened like last week, or a little over last week. Boy, I'm nailing these sentences. But the Peace Summit, it was called the Second International Peace Summit earlier this month in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It was led by Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor for Joe Biden. And I'll show you. This is the headline from Voice of America, which does so much of our wonderful propaganda. Um, and so you can go read articles now about how important it was if you're reading the propaganda coming out of the Western countries. Oh my God, this peace summit was so critical. So the summit was in Saudi Arabia. It was led by Mohammed bin Salman, MBS. NBS is what he's called in the NBA league. They just for short. You don't want to say Mohammed bin Salman. So MBS is his rap name, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, and it was led by him. And when you think peace, you think Saudi Arabia, right? When you think moral, ethical, just living by really important moral standards, you think Mohammed bin Salman. You think the guy who kidnapped, chopped up, and then barbecued a Washington Post reporter. That's what I think. I think that for anybody who chops up a Washington Post reporter, no, of course that was horrific, and that's why I bring it up, is the idea that you're going to have Saudi Arabia or the United States, but we're focusing on Saudi Arabia at the moment, lead a peace summit after the horror show that they're responsible for. And that's just, one example. Obviously, there's basically the genocide in Yemen that they've perpetrated, the imprisonment of all of his, and sometimes execution of all of the political dissidents in Saudi Arabia. Just the way women are treated there, but so many levels of horror show. And he led the peace summit there in Jeddah. So they had this peace summit. It was also featuring Zelensky, of course. Very important to have Zelensky there because it was a peace summit because they're trying to create peace in Ukraine, right? Now, there was one group you might say missing from the peace summit that some people believe might have had an impact at a peace summit when talking about the war in Ukraine, and that is Russia. Russia was not invited to the peace summit, which it is tough to create peace between two countries when one of them is not at the summit. And we should mention, Seymour Hersh didn't mention this, but we should mention that the U.S. and Britain made sure to end peace talks when this proxy war first started over a year ago. When that first started, the U.S. sent Boris Johnson as an emissary to shut down all peace talks, which apparently were very close to being completed between Ukraine and Russia back over a year ago. So the U.S. obviously did not have interest in peace at that, nor at this summit. Only a handful of heads of state actually went to this peace summit, other than Zelensky, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. Reuters reported that Zelensky's goal was to get international support for the principles that he will consider as a basis for the settlement of the proxy war, including, quote, the withdrawal of all Russian troops and the return of all Ukrainian territory. Now, here's the thing. Without even coming down on one side or the other of the proxy war in Ukraine, I don't know that the side that is losing a war can really say, yeah, we're only going to have peace once you leave everything in our area. It seems kind of like a non-starter. Like, I'm no military genius here, but I don't think you're going to, basically you're saying we don't want peace. If you are the losing side and you say, yeah, the only way of peace is if all of this ends and you give back all the territory, including Crimea, which you've had for a decade now or whatever it's been, you do that and you're kind of saying there will be no peace because that's not happening. We all know that's not happening. Russia knows it's not happening. Ukraine knows it's not happening, I think, unless they've really deluded themselves to that level. The U.S. now knows it's not happening, although I think the U.S. also deluded ourselves, meaning the government, not me, not anybody with a functioning brainstem. Meanwhile, during all this, Russia continued to stop all advances of Zelensky's so-called counteroffensive. So basically, and here's the thing, even if you've fallen for all the U.S. propaganda, you think that the U.S. played no role in this, it's not a proxy war, Russia just a wild hair up his ass decided to invade Ukraine, even if you believed all of that, you could still look at this rationally and go, I don't think that Russia completely leaving is going to happen. And so maybe rather than wait till every Ukrainian has been killed, we should try and work something out there. Like, no, you just want to see, let's wait and see till every Ukrainian is massacred. It's not pro-Ukrainian to have that stance in any way. It's just pro-U.S. propaganda. That's all it is. So basically, there's this meaningless peace summit without one of the two key players happening a world away while Ukraine is failing to actually push back the Russian offensive, which they all had hyped, right? We've heard this hype of the counteroffensive for months and months. The U.S. sends the billions of dollars of weapons over there to Ukrainian soldiers, although much of it is not actually getting to Ukrainian soldiers. Much of it gets sold on the black market. But still, we send these billions of dollars, $100 billion, while people here in America are fucking starving, while people are homeless, far more homeless than they'll admit to, while people don't have health care. We're sending $100 billion over to Ukraine. And they haven't pushed. There's been no counteroffensive that has actually succeeded. Yet, Ukraine and some people in the United States continue to push that line that the counteroffensive is going to work, where I don't think there's many rational people out there that still think that. So then it begs the question, as Seymour Hersh says in his article, it begs the question, why was Jake Sullivan overseeing this summit if nothing came out of it? It didn't have one of the key players, and there was largely no use to it. Why was he overseeing it? Well, Seymour Hersh's source inside the American intelligence community said, quote, Jeddah was Jake Sullivan's baby. He planned it to be Biden's equivalent of President Woodrow Wilson's Versailles, right? The grand alliance of the free world meeting in a victory celebration after the humiliating defeat of the hated foe to determine the shape of nations for the next generation. Fame and glory, promotion and re-election. The jewel in the crown was to be Zelensky's achievement of Putin's unconditional surrender after the lightning spring offensive. They were even planning a Nuremberg-type trial at the World Court with Jake Sullivan as the U.S. representative. So basically, the reason this meaningless summit, which it became less than meaningless because it actually seems harmful to the brand of the U.S., ruling the world, and everything we say goes. And if we're going to have a peace summit, then we're going to achieve something. And anyway, this meaningless summit, they basically planned it months before they saw how the counteroffensive actually has gone. And it became kind of this giant propaganda fest where it was like, well, if we have a peace summit, then that will mean that Russia's been defeated. So as long as we go forward with it, then that'll give the implication that Russia's defeated. It's kind of just believing, just smelling your own bullshit and saying it smells great. It seems to be kind of on that level. I guess it'd be smelling your own shit, not smelling your own bullshit. Because if you're shitting bullshit, then you should probably see a doctor. Because that either means you're eating bullshit or there's something wrong with your intestinal faculties that you are shitting shit from a bull. Because that, really, if that, folks, I feel like I need to get this out there. That you should see a doctor if that happens. Okay, so you've got that catastrophic peace summit, meaningless, with achieved nothing, but apparently it was intended to be this grand moment that was nothing but a fizzle. Next up on the Summer of Fail, we have Victoria Nuland. Many of you know of Victoria Nuland. She was really one of the key architects of the 2014 US-backed coup in Ukraine that put us on this path, toward a proxy war, that put us on this path. She is a true war hawk, does not care at all about sending us so close to nuclear war. Doesn't seem to bother her at all. She really, of course, willing to support Nazis in Ukraine, and it's really she's just a horrific human being. But anyway, so she and I'm sure the Wikipedia article, I'm sure it says she's an amazing wonderful diplomat who has done just great things in her life, because liberal Wikipedia just spouts whatever the liberal line is. But really, she'd be defined, I think she's defined more as a neocon. But as we've learned, when it comes to being pro-war, neoliberal, neocon, they agree on most of the things. There are some neocons, there are some neocons that are actually breaking with this and saying that we need to wrap up Ukraine because it's actually harming the U.S. empire. But so she was the architect of the Maidan coup in Ukraine. She was actually there in the square handing out flowers like the day after it happened. Horrific human being. So what does Biden do? He, of course, promotes her. He promotes her to Deputy Secretary of State, although he apparently hasn't formally nominated her because he knows there'd be a fight, or the people around Biden know there'd be a huge fight in the Senate. So they just do it they just say acting. When they don't want to actually have the fight, they just say, acting Deputy Secretary of State. So Nuland was sent to Niger after the coup that just happened there, right? Most of you know a coup just happened in Niger. And a coup just happened there, military coup, kicked out the U.S. puppet. And the U.S. is kind of flipping out about it. But it's not for some of the reasons that we've been told. There's another reason, and I'll get to that in a second. But so Nuland sent to Niger to see what could be salvaged after the coup there. The coup led obviously to the overthrow of the pro-Western government. It also was a pro-French government. French was the most obvious colonial power in Niger. Niger has much of the world's remaining uranium, or I guess more easily accessible uranium. French, apparently, like 3/4 of their power is coming from nuclear energy, so they need uranium. On top of that, you have U.S. drone bases there. So those drone bases with something like 1,500 U.S. personnel are sitting there trying to figure out what they're going to do. And here's a quote from Seymour Hersh. He says, most important and little noted in Western reporting in recent weeks, Niger is directly in the path of the new Trans-Saharan pipeline being constructed to deliver the Nigerian gas to Western Europe. The pipeline's importance to Europe's economy was heightened last September by the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines in the Baltic Sea. So hilariously, the U.S. blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines has actually made the world more dependent on this pipeline going through Niger, which now there's been a coup in Niger, which for now has stopped that pipeline. And that may be one of the biggest things that the U.S. is freaking out about, with losing their control of the country of Niger. And as I talked about in a previous episode, this is all part of African countries standing up to the colonial powers finally, and they're finally able to do this because of the waning power of the U.S. empire, the waning U.S. hegemony, and these are big moments in history. The New York Times reported that Nuland got nowhere after talks she described as, quote, extremely frank and at times quite difficult. Oh, yeah? What are your talks about how you want to re-coup Niger because you don't like that their puppet was kicked out. Did those talks, were they difficult? Were they a hard time? Hirsch's contact in the U.S. military said Nuland got a giant middle finger from Niger. So that shows how much power the U.S. empire has right now. Secretary of State, and so finally, here's the final one in the summer of fail. And again, I'm sticking with foreign policy, but many of you have been putting some of the, if you'd like to put more in the comment thread of why this is the U.S. summer of fail, but in some of the domestic summer of fail, which unfortunately Hawaii is still a state of the United States, which it should not be. It should be its own country, but that's a side note. But some of you pointed out that Biden has just said he's going to give, the Biden administration just said they're going to give $700 to each household that would burn down in Maui, which I'm sure that'll, $700 per household should solve it. I think, I mean, not only does it rebuild a house easy, you could probably rebuild a house in Maui for, I'd say, $250, and then you got, $450 left to play around with. But not only could you easily rebuild your house, but then on top of that, it should bring back your brother or your children that died in the fires. I mean, what's it cost to bring back a couple of humans? $200-300. So $700 really should cover it. It should fix all those lives. And it's good to see that Biden's doing the right thing there. But anyway, that aside, finally in our summer of fail, you have Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who, has anybody ever noticed Tony Blinken, you can see he's evil because he has no pupils in his eyes. And I think that's like all you need to know is he absolutely has snake eyes. I don't know about snake eyes, like the eyes of a dying star or something like that. It's just absolutely soulless. Anyway, Tony Blinken has not been seen much, but Seymour Hersh's source said Blinken has finally realized that the U.S. will not win the proxy war in Ukraine. Simply not going to happen, which is amazing because, me, with what little knowledge I have, without knowing what our military is doing day to day, without knowing how much money we're going to send to Ukraine, without knowing each of these things, I knew Ukraine wasn't going to win this proxy war. I knew the U.S. was going to, how do you not, how the fuck did Tony Blinken not realize that till now? But anyway, Tony Blinken realized the U.S. will not win the proxy war in Ukraine, and amidst his failure, Tony Blinken's failure. So I guess the point is that Tony Blinken was not the only one pushing for this proxy war, but he was a huge voice of oh no, Ukraine will win this. If we give just hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine and weaponry, then they will win and push Russia fully out, and we can jump up and down. And plus, now as I've mentioned many times on these live streams over the past year, over almost a year and a half, the goal was not to just push Russia back. The goal for the U.S. was to have all these sanctions on Russia, cut them off from the world community. And we thought it was going to go far better than it has. Instead, it has actually facilitated the splitting of the world's economies, which was going to happen anyway. So, but it would have happened probably slower. So the U.S. has actually facilitated their own cracking of their hegemony, and which is kind of hilarious in this whole proxy war. But despite all that, I've been saying we need to have fucking peace the whole time. But anyway, Tony Blinken was a big proponent of all this shit you've seen in Ukraine. And amidst his failure, I guess, amidst it not happening the way he said it would, Bill Burns, according to Seymour Hersh, the CIA director, has made a play to take Tony Blinken's spot and has not achieved that yet. Bill Burns is not the Secretary of State, but apparently he is trying to get in there. Hersh concludes his article about the summer of fail by saying that even though the Biden administration will continue to tout how great Ukraine is doing, they know the end is nearing. And I certainly hope that's true, that the end of this proxy war is nearing. For the people of Ukraine, I hope that. For the people of Russia, I hope that. For the world, I hope that. But I also have heard people say the end of this proxy war was nearing before, and it keeps not nearing. It keeps fucking going. So I don't know whether this could be true. I have said for months now that there is a rift in the ruling elite of the United States, not just on Donald Trump, which I've talked about, but there's a rift in terms of the Ukraine proxy war, and we see that with the likes of the 100-year-old Henry Kissinger bubbling up and saying that we needed to end the proxy war, as well as others who are full hawks, like other people who are responsible for millions of deaths are like, hey, we really need to stop this proxy war, because they see that it's actually harming the U.S. empire rather than facilitating, which is what they wanted. Okay, so there it is, the summer of fail. Hope you enjoyed that update. I am now going to move on to this. It's a discussion that was had on Fox News, but I think it, normally I don't give these type of shows much of the time of day, but to me, it actually explains what is going on in the right-wing mind in terms of policing in America, like what they're actually thinking. Oh, and someone just reminded me, Yard Rock 2024, like if we had an actual, thank you, Keen GB for reminding me about Yard Rock. If we had a literal rock sitting in the Oval Office right now, like a literal, the grayish brown stone that I'm running for president, yardrock2024.com, if it were sitting on the Oval Office desk, none of this shit would have happened. No proxy war. No fucking $100 billion to Nazis in Ukraine. None of the propaganda being pumped out of the Oval Office and out of our godforsaken government. None of that would have happened. None of this pushing us to the brink of nuclear war, which I don't think it can be overstated how close we've gotten to nuclear war. Like literally, Russia shot at a plane that they said was on the edge of their airspace, which turned out to be a British spy plane. They literally fired a missile at it. I think, it was a British plane. It was a spy plane or just, I don't remember, but it was a British jet. And literally they missed, like there was a misfire. If that had hit and taken out a British plane, who knows what the fuck would have happened then? Like, we are on the cusp of nuclear war and no one else, not no one else, but most people don't even care. And it's like, if there were a literal goddamn rock sitting on the desk of the Oval Office, there would be no brink of nuclear war right now. This would be a better planet right now. So, yardrock2024.com. Go over there. You can buy a t-shirt or a bumper sticker, and 50% of all proceeds go to deleting medical debt. We've already erased $65,000 of American medical debt for people, because RIP medical debt makes it so that we actually multiply our donation. So we've already erased $65,000 in medical debt. I'd love to erase more. Anyway, yardrock2024.com. Thanks for reminding me, folks. But yeah, I want to get to this Fox News clip, which really shows how right-wingers think about this shit. But it has to do with, and thanks Roberto for sending this to me. It has to do with, so this is just yesterday or something. But my main point is not Fox News is full of shit, which they are. But so is CNN, MSNBC. They're all full of shit. It's just a brand of shit. They all, as I said earlier, think their brand of shit smells good. But this clip is particularly hilarious because you see these numbskulls at Fox News trying to continue to justify their argument about defund police, about how, oh my God, we defunded it as a catastrophe and all this stuff, even though they secretly know that the police have not been defunded. So they're like, you'll see, they're trying to justify it, but it's like they have to keep stretching the mental gymnastics just gets bigger and bigger to try and justify this. But okay, so this is Fox News. And they're also talking about something that happened with a cop, which isn't important. So if you hear them say like what that cop did or whatever, just it doesn't matter.
Well, as for the small town, how small is it?
So what he's talking about is, sorry, I forgot to give you the last piece of prepping you for this. But when he says that small town, there's a small town in Minnesota where all the police just quit just the other day. But it is a truly small town. It has 1,200 people. It had something like 5 full-time police. So this is like a Walmart in another town. This is a nothing town. I don't mean the people there aren't lovely, but I guarantee you in a 1,200 person town in Minnesota, in rural Minnesota, where I looked it up on Google Maps, it's like 5 blocks. I guarantee you that these 5 cops were not stopping a lot of crime. There's not like a real criminal enterprise going on in a 1,200 person town that's 5 blocks long with 5 cops. I guarantee you. Whereas Fox News has to be like, all these cops are quitting. They found like one town, and the cops quit because, I'll get more into this. The cops quit because they weren't being paid enough, which had nothing to do with defunding the police. Nothing to do with it. But all right, so I had to give that prep.
Good sometimes goes bad. In this case, it went well. As for the small town, how small is it? I mean, they had
the 6-person force.
Yes.
Yeah. 1,200 people in the town.
Yeah. So, I mean,
there's 1,200 people in the town. Did you hear her say there's a 6-person police force? And I think some of them are not full-time. But whatever, 6 cops. So this thing that they're trying to make out, look at it. It says defunds dream across the bottom of the Fox News screen. This thing that they're trying to make out to be a big defund the cops moment was 6 fucking police officers. I live in Baltimore. There's 6 police officers per block. Like, this is they're trying to make this a story where there's no story. And even they have to admit, like, oh, this is a pretty small town, huh?
I mean, maybe this is a great experiment to go private. You know, private always does public better.
Ha 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 ha. Private always does public better. No, it fucking doesn't. What private does better is collect profit no matter what for the rich. And in the cases where, quote, private does public better, if you're talking about things like schooling, the reason the public schools are failing is because the government won't put money into them to begin with. So if you well funded the public schools, they'd be great. They'd be wonderful. Private doesn't do public better. Private exploits people better. But this is the garbage you get from Fox News, right? And from most right-wingers is this type of shit. They point to something that they defunded. I don't mean just, I do mean right-wingers because Democrats are right-wingers. So when I say right-wingers, it's often Democrats as well in the government. And so they defund it, and then they point to it and say, it's not working. The thing we cut all the funding for isn't working. What do we do now? Well, I guess we have to get, Amazon to teach the kids. Amazon and Apple and Elon Musk will teach the kids. So that's what they do. They defund it. They say it's collapsing. And then they go, oh, well, the only answer is to privatize it. And so here he is saying, maybe there's a great chance to go private. You mean to move to 5 private cops? You're going to have 5 mercenary cops in this town of 1,200 people. You know what those cops were doing in that fucking town? They were standing there. There's not... You understand what goes on in small town America with that's 5 blocks. Now, I understand there are small towns that have crime, but I would love to know the crime stats for this 1,200 person, 5 block long town.
Yeah, but for sure they can't afford it. I mean, they're paying. Can I speak?
Yeah.
Yikes. I don't know if that was I don't know if that's an ad or... I guess that's an ad. Okay. Oh. Interesting. It just jumped to some live stream, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. Well, give me a second. Maybe I can get it back up there, but I don't know. No, I think that is gone. Okay. No, you can't hit the back button. I think because that was a link to a live stream, it's now decided to jump the live stream to something else. Let's see. Sorry, folks. Well, I have a different version. This is Laura Ingraham or some shit, but anyway, I'll move on, but I'll keep talking about it for a minute. Sorry about that. But so what they keep referencing, and actually I have other things to show you about the same topic. Fox News will keep telling you about defund the police and, oh, look, they've been defunded and crime has gone up and the defunding and, oh my God, the defunding and, oh, it's so much defunding. There's been zero defunding, like almost zero. There's been some towns where there was some defunding back in like 2021, and then they immediately went the other direction. Anyway, I'll actually show you something from PolitiFact, which normally I don't show you PolitiFact because PolitiFact is a liberal bullshit outlet. A liberal propaganda outlet. However, I looked it up in various sources. What they're saying about this one is true. So this is Jim Jordan, congressman, Republican congressman, says, I got a list of 20 jurisdictions that defunded the police to the tune of over $1 billion. Boom! What a gotcha, Jim Jordan says. Oh, got it. Oh, wow. 20 jurisdictions, $1 billion total. Bam. So he said this in January 2023. So he said it this year. And PolitiFact has that as mostly false because it is nearly 100% false. Although here's the thing, they're actually wrong because all he said was, I have a list. So if he made up a false list of jurisdictions, then it's true. He's like, I have this list. Did you write that list? Yes. Is it true? No, it's absolutely not true, but I have a list. But anyway, and on his list, it says things like New York City, which has undone all of their defunding, which they had a little bit of defunding, but most of it didn't even get through the government there. And then what was left was like, initially they said $1 billion, but what was left was like $300 million defunding. But then of that, like half of it, they just repositioned cops from schools over to streets. They took it from school budgets or whatever. So really it was half of what they said it was. And now they've undone that. So New York City was one of the biggest ones, and it's been essentially completely undone. And then here's Austin, Texas, which was another one that had some defunding. But so here's the data to 2022. So they did have some defunding in 2020 to 2022. There was some defunding, and then they completely undid it. And now they have a larger police budget in Austin, Texas than they've ever had in the history of Austin, Texas. So the idea that Republicans are still touting this talking point of like, it's defunded and they defunded the things and the cops don't have any of the monies is bullshit. It's utter bullshit. In the case of that small town in Minnesota, why did those 5-6 cops quit? Because they said they weren't getting paid enough. So, and it was not because their budget of this town had been decreased. It was just that people across America in most jobs are not getting paid enough. And workers now have the ability, the strength to stand up and say, we are not getting paid enough. And that's not just cops. That's most jobs are now doing that, are now standing up, and people are saying, we're not getting paid enough. So, this is just loads and loads of horseshit. Then on top of that, and this is actually mentioned in the Fox News clip, one of them, maybe she claims to be a Democrat, but one of them who kind of every once in a while pretends to give the other side of the talking points. She said, well, defund the police is not the stated stance of the Democratic Party. Biden has funded police more than even Trump did. And she's saying it like, what a good thing. When in fact, I'm saying, oh, these are all sociopaths. And Biden has funded police, the fascist police forces across this country, even more than Trump did. Like, think of that. So again, this defund the police thing is not happening. There are some select instances where they defunded a little bit for like a year and then undid it. The only one that maybe continues is Minneapolis. But then, of course, all the right wing will point to any place that did decrease funding a little bit and say, crime went up and crime went crazy. Well, there's a lot of reasons crime is going up. And first of all, in a lot of places, it's not going up. So there's that too. They claim it's going up across the country. That's not true. In many places, it's gone down. In many places, violent crime has gone down. There are some areas where crime has gone up, but in those areas, it's mainly, first of all, like I said, there's been almost no defunding of police across the country, so you can't point to that as the reason that crime's gone up. But then on top of that, the real reason is due to all the shitstorm that happened through the pandemic, where you had people forced to stay home. They couldn't make a living. They couldn't pay their rent. Now you have stopped the eviction freeze. So people getting kicked out of their homes, people getting kicked off Medicare, which is a major story. People losing their health care. It's just like people's lives are destroyed at every angle. And you know what people do when their lives are destroyed? They try and find ways to survive. And they also try to find ways to self-medicate. So you end up with a lot more drug use. The overdoses are through the roof. Drug use can lead to bad decisions. I'm for decriminalization of drugs, but I also still admit that in some cases, drug use can lead to some bad decisions. So there's a million reasons. And the right way was to say, it's because of defunding the police. It's because of the thing we made up that we pretend it was everywhere when it was actually like 2 cities and they've stopped doing it. And defunding of police and actual police abolition or near police abolition could work if it also was combined with a large organizing effort of what community policing means, how it works, all these different things. And of course, you'd have to stop arresting people for dumb drug crimes. You'd have to stop the completely illegal and immoral drug war. There's a lot of steps to police abolition that have to be done in concert, that have to be done as a large process. Yes, of course, if you leave our city or any city, if you leave a city that is in the trenches, in the gutters of unfettered capitalist destruction, of inequality and unclean water and, all these problems, the education system is shit and all this stuff. And then you go, oh, also there's no police. Let's see what happens. And then, it doesn't work very well immediately. It's a lot more than that. It's a lot bigger than that. But like I said, there's been very little defunding of police across the country because Biden is Mr. Police. In fact, throughout his career in the Senate, Biden often said, throughout the 90s, early 2000s, he said any police bill, meaning anything that wants to fund them more, give them more power, give them more weapons, send them weapons of war. He's like, I want to be the face of it. Like, he has quotes to that, of that kind, of that style throughout his career, wanting to be Mr. Policing. So, meanwhile, his son, of course, was heavily addicted to drugs, which shows the hypocrisy as he pushes drug laws that have doubled the prison population. Thank you, Mimi, for saying you never hear this perspective on MSN. I really appreciate that, because that is kind of the idea of this show, is that you are not going to hear these perspectives on the mainstream media. And if you are speaking these perspectives on mainstream media, you're not there long. I'm a good example. You will become one of the most censored people on the internet, but definitely on the televisions. Okay, so I want to tell you real quick that I have a bunch of stories coming up, by the way, but some good news stories. My live comedy show, my live Zoom global comedy show is September 2nd and 13th. There are tickets still left, not so many for the first date, which is the one that's kind of at an American time frame, more for American, but the other is more for European time zones. But Mimi, I have Yard Rock tees. Sorry. It's weird when I interrupt myself with a comment that half of you watching can't see, but yardrock2024.com has Yard Rock t-shirts. And 50% of all proceeds go to cancel medical debt in America. But leecamp.simpletix.com is where you can get tickets to my live comedy show. It's a brand new hour. I promise you've never heard anything on it before, and you're gonna have a good time. I really think you're gonna love it. A special guest that I really think you're gonna love. Some of you have tried to guess who the special guest is, and you are wrong, at least the ones I've seen. So I really think you're going to love the show. That is Saturday, September 2nd at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. The September 13th show is much earlier. So if 9 p.m. Eastern is a non-starter for you, you have a little kid or something, then check out the September 13th show. But yeah, it's live comedy show, stand-up comedy, completely different from what you normally see from me. I mean, I don't mean different topics, similar viewpoints. Obviously, that's not going to change, but it's more personal. It's fucking funny, man. You're going to laugh. No, you do not. Yeah, you do not need a Zoom account to attend. You may need to click the thing that says download Zoom. Like, I think you have to have Zoom, but you don't have to have a paid Zoom account. So there will be no cost to you other than the $5 ticket to get in. Okay, so moving on. We are headed over to rumble.com/LeeCamp. That's rumble.com/LeeCamp. Join me over there. And, oh, damn it. Kai just guessed the special guest is Michael Jackson. You nailed it. That's well done. Well done, Kai. Rumble.com/LeeCamp. It's free to watch over there. I'm going to continue this live stream there. Join me. Also, locals, of course. I'll be there. This all continues there. If you're watching on Rumble or Locals, none of this will change. And people at Locals, I will be answering your question at the end of this hour. So I hope you'll hang out with me after that. All right, let's keep going. 1 second here.